well today. It's actually a beautiful 77-degree Monday morning. We're driving from our office in southeast Michigan through the Detroit area towards an area called Chesterfield or New Baltimore, picking up about 5 pallets of freight there today, maybe 1,500 pounds each. So it's around 7,500 pounds total, no big deal. And just a quick video to talk about something that happened to us a week or two ago that might be happening to some of you all out there if you've got a diesel that was made in the last 10 years. Meaning, well, actually a diesel made after around 2007, summer, fall of 2007. A diesel specifically that has a DPF, or a diesel particulate filter, otherwise known as a soot filter. And if you've got one of those trucks or cars, like one of the VWs, for instance, you know that that soot filter, which is made to, as its name suggests, to capture soot particles, those black particles of unburned fuel that you tend to see coming out of diesel trucks when they accelerate from a stoplight, or they suddenly accelerate to try to pass somebody or merge onto a highway. The soot filter was made to capture those black soot particles and try to cut down on the amount of pollution coming out of the engine. And as its name suggests, a filter needs to be serviced. And since you can't just pull over and replace your soot filter like you would an air filter or maybe an oil filter during your oil change, the soot filter does something called a regen, or regeneration process. And that is what your engine does when it detects that the soot filter has started to fill up and create obstruction to the flow of exhaust. And it does this in order to clean it out and essentially not make it as good as new, but make it to where it has removed the accumulated soot particles so that it stops being an obstruction to the flow of exhaust, and it prevents it from killing your power and your MPGs. Easy enough. And if you know how this works, the way a regen happens is that your vehicle injects extra fuel either into the engine using the injectors that are in the combustion chambers, your primary fuel injectors, or with a more modern diesel like the LML that we're driving, which came out in 2011. It's got a 9th fuel injector, and it does not use the 8 fuel injectors that are in the cylinders to inject that extra fuel. And that fuel combusts in something called the DOC, the diesel oxidation catalyst, in order to generate tremendous amounts of heat and basically burn out the accumulated soot from your soot filter. And a lot of times you don't even notice that this is happening, especially if you're on the highway doing highway speeds or towing a trailer, as we are today. We're towing our 48-foot cargo trailer, because your engine's under load and it's generating a lot of exhaust heat and a lot of exhaust volume, and frequently the amount of heat and exhaust volume that your engine is putting out does not even require extra fuel to get injected in order to burn off the soot in your soot filter, or just a little bit, to where it's not even noticeable. When you're in town, when you're either idling the engine or just cruising around at slow speed or doing errands or making stops, like if you drive a delivery truck, for instance, yeah, you will absolutely notice that your regen is happening. And even on the highway, you might see it. There'll be a message in your little driver information center. This, by the way, is the blue oval from Ford, if you've never seen it before. We're driving through Dearborn right now. But you might see a message in your information center that says, cleaning exhaust filter, continue to drive, or cleaning exhaust filter, do not turn off engine. And if you've ever seen the videos that Gale Banks has made on the subject, Gale Banks, He takes a subject like this and he could talk for like an hour and a half about it and make it sound interesting. We won't try to do the same. But it's imperative that you do not turn off the engine, because if you do, you may wind up, if you don't let the regen take its full course, you may end up actually plugging the soot filter to the point where it cannot be cleaned through a regen process, and you either have to take it to the dealer and have a forced regen happen, or they actually have to remove it and either replace it or clean it some other way. And you don't want that to happen. That's a very, very expensive repair, and the DPF is a very expensive item. It costs thousands of dollars because of all the effort it takes, and because of the materials that are inside it. It's a very expensive item. So just let the regen take its course. But what we noticed the other day is that whereas when you're on the highway, it's either unnoticeable because it happens and you don't even see the message, or you don't even see anything coming out of the exhaust, and you're not going to notice much of a change in power. You'll notice your MPGs go down a little bit, no big deal. But it just happens, and it's transparent. When you're driving around town and when you're idling, when you're making deliveries, when you're doing errands, yeah, you're going to see that message. It's almost going to blink. And you're also going to notice that there is a large volume of what appears to be soot coming out of your exhaust. And it's actually not soot. It's not black like regular soot. Like if you're rolling coal, it's not that color. It's actually gray. And it's ash material. It's what burnt soot turns into, which is gray ash. And the other day when this regen was happening, we noticed it because, again, the exhaust turned gray and it became that really, really offensive smelling, just absolutely foul smelling odor. And it was unmistakable that a regen was happening. But the light or the message stayed on the screen and it didn't go away for 2 or 3 hours. And the reason why, as we discovered once we got on the highway and started pulling our trailer a little bit, is that in order for that regen to take its full course, the exhaust has to be exceptionally hot, and to the tune of, hundreds and hundreds of degrees, because that DOC, the diesel oxidation catalyst, which is what facilitates the regen, which is upstream of your exhaust filter, your DPF. The DOC is similar to the catalytic converter in a regular car. And in a regular car, a catalytic converter is meant to turn unburned hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide into harmless products. It turns the CO into CO2, and it turns your unburned hydrocarbons into water vapor. And in a diesel with a DPF, it's got a catalyst similar to your car's catalytic converter, and it does some of the same things. Yeah, it gets rid of carbon monoxide, it gets rid of some unburned hydrocarbons, what's called gas phase hydrocarbons. But the main purpose is to generate a ton of heat. And so that fuel that we were talking about that gets injected into the exhaust when a regen is happening, the purpose of that fuel is to generate massive amounts of heat. Again, to burn off the soot from your soot filter. And this only works if the DOC, the diesel oxidation catalyst, is heated to what's called its light-off temperature. And the light-off temperature is somewhere around just under 600 degrees. I think it's like 585 degrees, 590 degrees. And that can only happen if your exhaust, again, is really, really hot. And you're not going to get hot exhaust when you're idling. You're not going to get hot exhaust when you're just cruising around town at low speeds. You have to put the engine under load. Like, for instance, by getting on the highway and driving highway speeds, or hitching up your trailer and going up hills, for instance. And you got to get that exhaust hot. Because unlike a lot of other circumstances or situations, heat is actually your friend when it comes to exhaust after treatment in a diesel. And so, if that heat is not present, then your DOC will not reach light-off temperature, and your regen's not going to happen. And so you could have your message on your driver information center for hours, like we did the other day, for 3 hours. But you can't turn the engine off because you do not want to leave a plugged DPF, and it's in that condition. And so the moral of the story, again, is get that truck out onto the highway, get the exhaust temperature up, and let the DOC get up to temperature, and burn off the fuel in your that's being injected into the exhaust, which only starts to happen around between, again, 585 and 600 degrees, and that generates even more heat, something around 1100 degrees, which allows the soot to get removed from your soot filter. And so if you're on the highway, if you do a lot of highway driving, again, you may never notice a regen happening. We just did, in the last week and a half, 2 round trips to Indianapolis. It was about 300 miles each way. We were delivering freight in support of an Army contract at a place called Camp Atterbury. So we did, again, 300 miles out and back twice. So that's a total of 1,200 miles. Did we do a single regen? Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to tell because, again, that message never came on the dashboard, and it may have just been happening transparently, or the DOC may have been at 585 plus, just based on the load we were putting on it. We were only going, between 60 and 70 miles an hour, but because the load we had, it made enough heat in that DOC to generate 1100 plus degrees into the DPF to burn it off, to burn off all that soot. The other possibility is that the soot particles weren't really being generated in the first place because we had highly efficient combustion happening. And what you notice in a diesel is that when you have, when you're running highway speeds, highway loads, heavy trailers, your EGTs, your exhaust gas temperatures, are running pretty hot, especially, when you got your turbo putting out a lot of boost. And so those soot particles might just be getting burned before they even get to the DPF. Or they might not be getting generated in the first place because, again, your combustion temperatures and your combustion pressures are extremely high. Your exhaust is extremely hot. And so between the combustion chamber, your exhaust valves, your headers, your turbo, at all those different stages of the exhaust system that it goes through, maybe that's just getting burnt off before it even gets to the DPF and creates and gets trapped there in the first place. So you may have very few or none in terms of regens when you're on the highway running highway speeds. Again, the moral of the story, don't sweat bullets if you notice that there's a regen and your light is on for extended periods of time. It doesn't mean your truck is broken. It doesn't mean you got a problem with the DPF. It doesn't mean you got some other mysterious problem somewhere else in the exhaust system. Maybe the 9th fuel injector isn't working. No, just get on the highway and start running some highway speeds, and before you know it, the regen will be complete. Again, you're going to notice a very, very large amount of smoke coming out of the exhaust. And you might think, well, what's the point of even having a DPF if it's kicking out all that smoke during the regen? And I guess as far as the EPA is concerned, black smoke, which is soot, is bad. And gray smoke, which is ash, is not as bad. And maybe it settles down to the earth quicker. And maybe it doesn't cause all the respiratory issues in city dwellers the way that diesel soot does. Hard to say. But again, I hope that makes sense. To review, the 9th fuel injector in something like an LML, also known as your dosing injector, also known as your hydrocarbon injector, its specific purpose during a regen is to put extra fuel into the exhaust system in order to be burned in the DOC, the diesel oxidation catalyst, which is very similar to a car's catalytic converter, and does some of the same functions in terms of reducing CO and turning CO into CO2, and turning unburned hydrocarbons into water vapor. But the critical thing that it provides for a diesel engine is extreme heat into your DPF to burn off the soot. And that extreme heat can only be generated at the light-off temperature of 585 plus degrees. And so you can sit there all day idling your engine with the little warning light on and the little message on saying that a regen is happening. But unless you are generating enough heat to light off that DOC, similar to your car's catalytic converter, at 585 to 600 degrees, and generate 1100 degree heat into your DPF, that regen will not complete itself. So I hope that makes sense. Again, heat in a lot of cases is your enemy, but not when it comes to exhaust after treatment. We've been driving this truck for about a year. It's a 2011. It's got almost 400,000 miles. As far as we know, it's on the original DPF. We've seen the maintenance records from the previous owner. They did a ton of highway driving. They spent pretty much the life of this vehicle on the highway between Lake of the Ozarks in Branson, Missouri, and Atlanta, Georgia, picking up boats. And that's kind of the ideal use case for an engine like this, because it's getting a lot of highway speed, a lot of highway loads, a lot of exhaust heat, and it's letting the after treatment system do its thing. And somebody on the other hand who runs like a landscaping company or does, I don't know, deliveries, drives around town a lot with a modern diesel, with modern after treatment, might experience a ton of issues with their exhaust after treatment system because of the simple fact that they are not letting the exhaust get up to temperature in order to run the DOC, in order to clean the DPF sufficiently. And so you don't have to be afraid of a modern diesel. You know, we had a Cummins. We still have a Cummins. It's a 2003 5.9. It doesn't have any of that, what you might refer to as emissions crap. And that was all we knew for years. And we thought, well, that's all we're ever going to have. We had it for 7 years before we bought this one. And all we'd ever heard was the horror stories of all this modern emissions crap that ruins the performance of your diesel, and it ruins your MPGs, and it's a maintenance nightmare. And that's the reputation it had early on. But by the time the LML came out, which is 2011, GM had 4 years of experience with DPFs, because the DPF came out in 2007.5 in the LMM engine. Check out that burned out factory over there. I think that might have been the Fisher body plant many years ago. But yeah, so GM used the experience of the LMM in order to inform the design and engineering of the LML, which came out in 2011. And so they had 4 years of time to figure out all the drawbacks, the positives and negatives of, at least of the DPF system. They did not add the DEF system, otherwise known as SCR, until the LML came out in 2011. And actually, one lesson learned they took from the LMM was that if you inject fuel into the combustion chambers after the combustion cycle is complete, meaning after your ignition has happened and push the piston down from the heat and the pressure of the ignition, and then you got the exhaust valve opening and the piston traveling back up to remove that exhaust from the engine, that's when they injected the fuel in the LMM, after the power stroke, where the power cycle was complete. And what they learned is that, well, it's not good to inject that much fuel into the engine and not burn it, because it starts to wash off lubrication from the cylinder walls, and it starts to get into your oil and contaminate your oil with fuel. And both those things are bad. You start to cause premature wear on the walls of your cylinders. And again, contaminating your fuel, your oil with unburned fuel is exceptionally bad. So when they came out with the LML, they said, no, we're going to remove that entire process from the inside of the combustion chambers. And we're going to use this 9th fuel injector, again, otherwise known as the dosing injector, otherwise known as the hydrocarbon injector. And that is going to be positioned at the outlet of the turbo. And so that's what the LML uses. And so again, our message is, don't be afraid of these modern diesels. Yeah, they've got a lot more complexity than something like a 5.9 Cummins. But it's kind of the way things have to be. We know that the EPA has its agenda, and we know that a lot of other people are trying to get rid of the internal combustion engine altogether. And who knows if that's what the future holds for all of us. With electric cars, yeah, maybe so. In a lot of cases, we got a Tesla, we got a Model S. It's a good car. It does just fine. We didn't get it for the environmental benefits, because some people say the verdict is still out as far as that's concerned, because of all the mining you got to do to get that lithium out of the ground. We got it because it was in terms of the performance, in terms of the potential for reduced maintenance. And for a few other reasons. You can write off the miles when you're using it for business purposes, so on and so forth. And so that's fine as far as automobiles are concerned, but for a pickup truck, that Rivian just came out a week or two ago. As long as you're not towing a trailer, that could work potentially, maybe. The F-150 Lightning is coming out. Again, as long as you're not towing a trailer and you don't actually you're not taking real road trips, and you're not doing a ton of highway driving, as we do. Yeah, for some people that could work. But for a 3/4 ton or a 1-ton pickup, a dually, actually towing a real trailer, actually going hundreds of miles a day, or for what you see here, all these 18-wheelers, absolutely not. There's no way an electric 18-wheeler is going to be practical for the majority of customers, or an electric 3/4 ton pickup, or an electric 1-ton pickup. Absolutely not, until they solve the range issue. Until you can drive all day with a 48-foot trailer and get where you're going without having to stop and charge 2 and 3 and 5 times. It's just not there yet in terms of battery technology. So until that time, this modern after treatment stuff, it's something we're just going to have to put up with and learn to live with. Because the alternative is just for diesel trucks to be banned altogether, and that's not acceptable. Bottom line, don't be afraid of modern diesels, as long as you're doing a lot of highway driving and you can get that exhaust system up to temperature. So that's probably enough about that. Anyway, thanks everyone. Hope you have a great day. Talk to you later.